Okay, good afternoon, friends, colleagues, strangers, everybody who's here. We're expecting about 40 people, certainly in terms of registrants for this event. So I'll give it a wee minute. My name's Simon McKerrell. Delighted that you've joined us. We're going to be sticking rigidly to time, you'll be pleased to hear. So we'll definitely be finishing by 2. But we'll just give it a quick minute to see if everybody else who wants to join us is able to join. I should have muted you upon entry if I've got the technology working correctly. But if I have failed to mute you and you're not on the actual panel, then please can you make sure you stay muted for the event anyway. I'll just give a quick introduction to the speakers that we've got with us today, and I'm really grateful for everybody who's given up their time, particularly this panel of people who have been doing a hell of a lot of work thinking about their own events and festivals in the Highlands and Islands this year, last year, for many years, in all cases. And so I think it's going to be really fascinating to hear what they've got to say about this very strange position that we find ourselves in for 2021, but also thinking about, what happens in coming years to come as well. What I'll say is also, this is very much, an opportunity for people to ask questions too. So please post any questions into the chat at any time, really. Hopefully, we can actually get people to ask their own questions as well, if they appear reasonably sane on camera to do so. Yeah, okay. So my name's Simon McKerrell, and I work at Newcastle University, and I'm really delighted that we've got this panel here today. We have got Caroline MacLennan and Graham MacCallum from HebCelt Festival. So many thanks to them in Lewis and also in Glasgow, I think, coming to us today from Lewis and Glasgow. We've got Craig Corse, who wears quite a few different hats in the folk genre, and he's coming today to talk to us about the just past Orkney Folk Festival, which can be really interesting to hear about that, Craig, and also about CMM Live and just agency work and other things like that as well, and thinking about audiences and what we're all supposed to be thinking about in terms of getting performing arts back on an even keel after the pandemic. And I'm also delighted to have Torquil Telfer, who's joining us from Oban. Torquil is here to talk about the Argyllshire Gathering, about piping, particularly at the Argyllshire Gathering. Someone with whom I've known for many, many years as a piper myself, but also somebody who's given a great deal of time and energy over many, many years to that event, which is definitely, I would say, the largest global gathering of solo pipers in the world. Takes place every year, and this year's a special year because it's the 150th anniversary of the Argyllshire Gathering this year in 2021. So it'll be interesting to hear about that too. So I think if the panel are all unmuted, and I'm looking here, I think have I managed that? I think I've managed that. Graham seems to have disappeared momentarily, but hopefully he'll be back. But I think I just wanted to kick off with the kind of most obvious question, which is, how have you been approaching and dealing with the viability for your festival this year? Is it going ahead, or in Craig's case, it has gone ahead digitally? What have you been doing in terms of planning and just generally how have you been approaching it? So if I could maybe ask Craig to kick off actually, and just say a few words about Orkney Folk Festival, which is just past this last weekend.
Yeah, well, thanks very much. Thanks for having me. So Orkney Folk Festival has I think in hindsight, it's actually probably the benefit of coming quite early in the season, in that we knew fairly early on that we wouldn't be able to do anything live. So it's not really like we had to wrestle with the idea of doing anything, you know, kind of semi-live, semi-digital. We kind of, once the Christmas lockdown kind of was quite obvious that was quite hellish, we knew we had to go fully digital if we were going to do anything. Largely because of our model, in that we're a gig-based or concert-based festival. We've got 35 ticketed events over 4 days rather than being one singular site. We pack those venues full, and there was just no way it would work if it wasn't going to be full capacity. We did spend all of the autumn looking at potential moves towards a single site venue outdoors, and we did a lot of research with colleagues throughout the sector to try and assess that, having not been something we'd ever done before, in hope that we could have something live. But as I say, once Christmas had happened, we knew that it was going to have to be digital across the board. So what we ended up doing was replicating as much of the live event as we could. So across 4 days, just last Thursday to Sunday, we had 10 concerts rather than the 35. The vast majority of those were brand new commissioned sets from international artists, from Scottish artists, and overwhelmingly from Orcadian artists as well. Those were filmed earlier in this, well, around about Easter onwards, so kind of quite close to the event relatively, in April, with a studio set up in Glasgow, and also with a cracking team of folk in Orkney as well, and pulled those together to create a 4-day programme. We streamed that, as I say, just over last weekend through YouTube, so it was intentionally on the most user accessible and user familiar platform. The festival itself is 38 years old, and a lot of the audience have been with us since the start, so we were very aware that anything we had to create had to be accessible to them, as well as the tech-savvy audiences that have been doing this for a year plus. And yeah, it went down very, very well. We ticketed it for the first time ever on an all-inclusive weekend pass. Usually it would be concert tickets and people could choose whether they want to spend a tenner or 150 quid. This time we streamed it all at 40 quid for the whole weekend, in the hope that people would watch more than they would normally attend, but also by allowing them a week's catch up until this Sunday, the 6th of June, they can go back and rewatch things, or can find the time to watch more than they would normally do, in hope that that develops the audience for when we're able to return live next year, hopefully. And yeah, it seems to have gone very, very well.
Yeah, how are you judging that success, Craig? I mean, what's your benchmark for that being a success digitally?
The bottom line, really. We wouldn't have been able to go ahead. I should say this year we were able to, well, I was going to say we were able to attract a lot more funding. We reached out for a lot more funding than we would normally have to. We attracted, we get an annual grant from Orkney Islands Council, which we're very grateful of. We retained that. We also received funding from Creative Scotland, from Event Scotland's Event Recovery Fund, and we also had partnerships with, or advertising partnerships with Orkney.com and with Northlink Ferries. Reason being that we were doing these very high quality digital shows, it was a perfect opportunity for them to be able to showcase the county and travel back to it. So what these organisations are already doing. So we were able to rely a lot more on funding than we usually would. But we were also very, very surprised that our sponsorship target sailed far beyond what we thought it would, given that the pandemic's hit everyone. And so many local businesses in particular were very keen to support the festival to ensure that it could come back live, because it's the biggest thing annually in the town of Stromness and one of the island's biggest events throughout the year. So there was loads of businesses very keen to ensure that we were able to come back. So that reduced the dependency on our box office, which in a live festival is usually around 85%, which is very, very high. This year it was a lot less, and we've managed to break even on that, so that's happy. But I think in terms of actual numbers, we sold just over 700 full weekend passes. So we're reckoning, we're still to do our post-event survey and find out exactly how many people were watching, because that's obviously per stream, household, what have you. But we reckon that that'll be around about 15 to 1700 individual people, which is on a par with how many would actually travel to the festival.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really? So you think that it sounds like you've cracked it then. So, I mean, given that, do you think that you're potentially going to be doing some of this if we get back to in-person events next year?
We don't really know. I mean, I think in terms of the festival's growth, pandemic aside, digital was perhaps the only way that we could feasibly grow without altering the foundations of the festival too much. You know, the venues in Stromness are the size that they are. I doubt anyone's going to be building a 1,000 capacity venue anytime soon. And we, in some cases, we use the Stromness Town Hall 4 times a day in like fully turned over, fully sound checked gig. We can't pack any more in. So the only growth route for us would be through monetized streaming in some way. And that had already kind of been in the back of our minds. And I guess this has perhaps accelerated looking into that. And we've actually been speaking with Expo North about various feasibility studies about how we can introduce that to perhaps either allow the festival to grow, or if there are still issues around about capacities and distancing and whatnot next year, then it may be that we have to fill any shortfall on enforced distancing and the obvious impact box office.
It does sound like a really positive story, and I'm really pleased to hear it.
Yeah.
Caroline or Graham, do you want to jump in there and give us a sense of what HebCelt's, what the thinking is this year with HebCelt and how you've been approaching it?
Sure. I suppose we took the decision probably in December last year when we realised that things weren't going to improve much. We delayed it for another month or so just to be sure that we're making the right decision, and then kicked it in the head in January this year, much to the disappointment of everybody, of course, because HebCelt's is a huge thing for the islands and the Highlands as well, as you probably know. We were due to celebrate our 25th last year. So last year we kind of put together some digital content to keep us going until this year. So this year we thought, well, we'll try and improve what we did on last year and set about creating an event with a digital focus. And I'll give Graham because he's really had the head in this one.
So first of all, can you hear me okay? Because I've had to switch devices, so I apologise for that. Yeah, so as Caroline touched on, we took the decision to cancel what had been the rolled over event for 2020 and present it in a digital format for this year, or a hybrid digital format this year. So we're hoping, in a similar vein to what Craig has organised with Orkney, present a real taste of HebCelt to our audience who can't travel to the island, be with us this year. So there's challenges obviously within that, trying to capture the essence of what is a live cultural event and present that digitally. So we're just about there with our plans and ready to pull the trigger on this PR side of things, but just a few little things to polish off to finish just yet.
Can you give us a sense of the kind of scale that you're planning for with that? Are you going to do it pre-recorded like Craig? Or are you going to do live, or what's the kind of feeling at the moment?
Certainly. So we're aiming for the truly sort of hybrid approach. It'll be there'll be elements of live streamed as well as pre-recorded packages, and we're hoping, where possible, that the live streamed element will take place in front of a small but live local audience.
Great. And I mean, what's the team feeling like? Because it's been such a sort of, up and down journey of people I've spoken to. But what's the sense up there in terms of the team who normally work in the festival? It's quite a big team, as I understand it.
Yeah, there's about 8 or 10 of us dotted all around the country. But I think the team spirit is very much of, we're going to create this, what we've called the survival sessions. We'll create this and it'll hopefully be a step for us to take into next year. But they're all very positive about it and totally bought into the whole idea. And as everybody knows, it's the only way forward, really.
Yeah. yeah, there's not much else you can do this year. But is that how, you know, you guys feel about it? It's a holding pattern thing. It's just going to be for this year only, and then, you know, we'll hopefully get back to real live music next year. Or do you feel differently about it?
I think without a doubt there'll be elements, as Craig touched on with Orkney. We're similarly constrained perhaps by, you know, our main arena venue can't really grow too much around the Castle Green in Stornoway, so that's a sort of fairly fixed size of area, and we have fringe activities that take place around the island. So in terms of growing the event, digital really does offer a great avenue for that. And I think over the last more than 14 months now, as everyone knows, so much time and effort and expertise have gone into developing, you know, really incredible digital options to present events. So it offers some really exciting prospects for the future. So I can definitely see it remaining part of the program, but we're very much looking forward to getting back to live programming.
You're keeping upbeat, right? By the sounds of things, you're quite upbeat, right? Torquil, let's come to our Argyllshire gathering. So 150th anniversary this year, and I think I speak for lots of pipers when we say we were really looking forward to getting back in the games field. And I know that over the weekend then there was a decision to cancel the actual in-person event, which is really sad. But also, you know, I think give us a sense of where that came from, and also what you are thinking about, and how it's been panning out for you.
It was very sad yesterday morning, because we knew that they were going to have to make a decision as time was going on. And our sisters competition is the Northern Meeting, and they've got the problem that they hired the Eden Court, which you can imagine is very, very expensive over the 3 days. So they had to make a decision to either go or not to go, and they pulled it. And we felt, yes, we had to go with them, because if you take the likes of probably the top prize in piping, the gold medal, it's a truly international competition. And it's sponsored by the Highlands Society of London. And I'm quite sure they would give a gold medal to the Argyllshire gathering if the Northern Meeting wasn't going to have one, Simon. So we decided, yes, we'll have to pull it. Would it be worthy winning a gold medal this year, a World Championship gold medal, with an asterisk against your name because you didn't have any competitors from Canada and New Zealand? And this is where the problem was going to be. So yes, we decided to pull it. We would like still to do something for the 150th. Now, what we're going to do, I really don't know. You know, I haven't given it much thought at this stage. I think a lot will come from when I find out what the appetite is for a competition for the pipers, what they want to do. But I certainly would like to do perhaps a 2-day event, perhaps outside and not inside. One of the problems we have with the pandemic is tuning rooms. You know, somebody likened the bagpipes to having 5 aerosols going off at the same time, you know, with your drones and your chant and your mouthpiece. So how do we clean up a tuning room afterwards when somebody else has got to go in following the previous competitor? And I also find that the guidelines, and I think this is why we were so late making this decision in real terms, because it's very difficult to follow the guidelines. Now, even if we go outside, do we have to put chairs 3 meters apart around every platform, or can people just stand next to each other? It's things like this that we don't know. As far as going on and having online events, having such a high standard competition on a Pembroke base, it's very difficult to do it online, purely because of the harmonics and the balance and the tone of the pipes to get it right. And I don't think it would be right to have a truly international competition on that basis. Interestingly, somebody suggested last night that we could have international competitions on a sort of country area basis, where they have an international competition in New Zealand, one in Australia, one in America, one in Canada, and it's locally judged. And at that, then we get somehow get a recording studio so that the recordings are very, very high quality and they could be judged on that. But that's an idea going forward. That won't be for this year. It might be next year. The other problem we have, Simon, is you know that there's an awful lot of very high quality pipers that want to compete in Oban in their Argyllshire gathering. Now, for the likes of the Beaver competitions, we can only take 25 to 30 competitors maximum for each competition because of the length of the tunes. Now, for the silver medal, for instance, we have applications of up to 45, 50 people. So in February, we've got to decide who's going to play in these competitions. And this is a big problem going forward because we usually decide on track records. So if somebody's going out and playing at the Small Highland Games, winning prizes, showing something, well, they're obviously going to get chosen before somebody that could be a very good player that hasn't been out for a year. You know, that this is very important. But so going forward, how do we choose if we miss out 2 years? How do we choose who has got the merit to play in the next competition? And one of the interesting things on that sort of basis was I was speaking to one of the teachers in the schools, and he was talking about, say we do a go ahead and open with the games for the 150th. He said, I haven't seen any of my kids since last March. We can't just pull a pipe band together and play automatically and get the sound. And have they been practicing? There's so many questions as far as that's concerned. And it's also, we've got to remember, time's gone on in the 2 years. He's lost all these top players from 5th and 6th year, which is a big difference as well, Simon.
I know. And there's so many things happening, particularly in learning, you know, in schools and stuff. It's now so long now that, you know, I really worry about the effects overall. Could I ask all of you to say just a few words briefly about the kind of impact on the local area? You know, because I know, you know, there's an interesting question, I think, around if you've got a digital event, then what kind of impact is that having in terms of, okay, it's a carrot for tourism at some point in the future, but there's no potential, you know, is there income going to be accruing to the local economy through that? Probably not. Although, you know, how have people responded to that? Craig, first of all, do you want to say a few words about the local, you know, economy and Stromness and Kirkwall and what people are saying to you? Oh, maybe have you muted? I have to unmute you again. Right, there we go.
Sorry, I think I might have done that myself. Sorry, force of habit. Yeah, I think our festival definitely did have a local impact, and certainly, I mean, we were very keen to ensure that from the outset. As you know, we're a community-based festival. We're a charity. You know, we don't really turn or sit on a profit. Any profit that we make is reinvested back into the festival or the local community, you know, often for providing assistance for youth groups to travel south, like that sort of thing. So we don't, you know, do it for commercial gain as such, other than to the benefit of the community. And as I said, it's by far the biggest event in Stromness every year. And, you know, when it came to, you know, well, last year's cancellation and then this year's as well, you know, that weighed very, very heavy on our hearts, is that, you know, there so many local businesses are going without, that much needed income. I mean, it was just kind of said in passing on numerous occasions in previous years that for some of the industries that are heavily reliant on tourism, such as hospitality, the festival helps clear their invoices since Christmas in that busy period. So it's huge. The impact of the festival live cannot be underestimated in that respect. And with this year's festival, we were very, very keen, although it was all pre-recorded, we were very keen for that not to all be done south. Glasgow was obviously chosen as a base for where a lot of the visiting artists that we were already committed to from 2020's festival, that was a kind of central base to record them, and that's where I'm usually based, so it was quite fortuitous in that respect. But the festival is as much about programming Orkney artists, and we usually have about 2/3 Orcadian artists and 1/3 from elsewhere. So that had to be replicated in our programme as well. So they were all recorded at home, and that involved a lot of local crews and freelance technicians and audio crews and everything like that who are based there. So we were able to provide that work for them. In terms of the tourism impact, we reckon that will happen long before next year's festival. So we won't be doing anything live until May 2022, but certainly folk from the UK can now travel to Orkney, and that was why we sought out partnerships with Orkney.com, which I should say is Highlands and Islands Enterprise and the OIC's partnership for, it's basically the Orkney Tourist Board is what it is now. So we sought out those partnerships with them and with Northlink Ferries to really drive home kind of the fact that Orkney's open for tourists now, but also one of the key messages in one of the Orkney.com videos is find your space, in that there's plenty of space for tourists to come in and not have that kind of city experience, which they might be reluctant to do at the moment. So we certainly think that that will have an almost immediate effect of people looking to plan weekends or weeks, you know, because international travel is obviously still so up in the air.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So do you think in a way rural festivals might be at an advantage in that respect, Craig?
I think those who identify and promote a sense of place, I think there's a really strong tourism pickup going to come from that, I think. And I know certainly from having gone through the application process with Event Scotland, that's one thing that they're very, very keen to see is not only that the festival will see this year out and will survive beyond that, but it's how the festival will contribute to the local economy's recovery from COVID full stop. And so that's why we were keen to include as much of the Isles and other island industries, be that food, drink, crafts, textiles, whatever, in the online offering. And we'll gain much more insight into that once we do our post-event wrap-up as to whether folk went online and bought bottles of gin or ordered any beer or, you know, anything like that. Even that was all included in the kind of ad breaks in amongst. All
right, so you're measuring upticks in that, maybe spikes in that, maybe. Yeah, great. Caroline or Graham, do you want to just kick in there in terms of what does it mean this year? What does it mean next year for Lewis and HebCelt?
So this year, as Orkney has done as well, we're doing a similar kind of take on profiling the area and the artistic and creative community that we have here, and pulling together the festival this with the performers or tech crew. Or we're fortunate in we've got people here that can help us with the live streaming, that sort of thing. So that's a very strong element of our festival this year. As Craig also touched on, the festival, when it happens live, has such a huge impact on the local community, and not just the business and tourism sectors, but the artistic community as well, the young ones. It's important to get them in amongst the festival and understanding what that beast is and then what it is to perform at it, and the succession through that for those who have come through the festival the last sort of 25 years. I think as far as the business sector is concerned, we're slightly concerned with what's happened, what we're going to lose between sort of last year and next year in terms of tourism infrastructure. And that's just a bit of an unknown quantity for us. Is there anything else, Graham?
Nothing really. Sort of Craig, both Craig and Caroline have covered so much of what the impacts on an island festival specifically, but that
are you saying therefore that you think that the loss of certain businesses which aren't in the art sector, but you know, not in the festival, like, you know, say B&Bs and restaurants or whatever, you think that's going to have a potential knock-on effect for your own event?
Well, potentially it has, because we take in over 50% of our audience travels home to the festival each year. Now they could people like families who are living away, working away, coming home, or visitors from all around the world who come to the festival every year. And we, because we're not a camping event, we rely on the community to host for those who come and stay with us. And then there's all the people behind that which support that. So what's going to come, what's going to be left next year? I mean, this is going to be a tough year. It's been a tough year going past. What's going to be left next year is going to be interesting to see.
I would echo that if I could, just from Orkney and specifically Stromness's perspective as well. I mean, one of our major assets as a festival is the town of Stromness. It's so picturesque, it's so ideal. It lends itself very, very well to a kind of cozy but not over the top and overwhelming festival. But in terms of bringing that together, we book out the entire Stromness Hotel, which is 40 bedrooms. We need that for the visiting artists. It has not reopened since December 2019. And we're kind of increasingly concerned as to what might be going on there, because such a big hotel like that in a town of 2,000 people needs that tourism income from our weekend and from every other weekend of the year, or certainly in the summer season where they get a lot of the group tours coming in. If that doesn't reopen next year, I mean, there's various rumours, but can't really get to the bottom of anything at the moment. But if that doesn't reopen, then we have a major issue as to how we're going to bring in all the artists that we usually do, let alone the visiting audiences as well.
Yeah, that's a significant point. Torquil, do you want to just chip in there about the impact of the wider community?
On the wider community, we're slightly different, I would say, Simon. On the first day, it's purely down to the classical Pibroch music, and it doesn't have such an effect in tourism. What it does have an effect in is the camaraderie between all the pipers, so you know yourself, meeting them from all over the world in a small community basis, and that's very important. And then on to next day, it's more the sort of tourism thing, the full Highland Games, where the piping takes place at the same time. And you're probably looking at, I don't know, 3,000, 4,000 people at that, Simon, I would say. They probably are mostly travellers for the day,
More, I'd say more. Yeah, more, definitely more.
Probably more. It's hard to say in a big area like that. That's the problem going forward, what we can do coming forward. A lot will mean that this year on a live event is what we can afford. I think a recovery fund of some sort, which has been applied for, is really important, because if we go to the expense of hiring marquees, etc., setting everything up, like even trade stands, that's a big money income. But will we be allowed to have trade stands this year? There's questions that we don't really can answer at this time.
And there's also problems with public liability insurance and things now with post-COVID, So, for instance, if events are going to be cancelled because of, pandemic surges or whatever, then, potentially festivals aren't going to be covered because they've changed the policies for the insurer and all that sort of side. We've got some questions coming in here. Carol, do you want to ask your question here about the sort of you're raising that really positive relationship between Orkney and the local businesses in the local council? Where are you, Carol? Well, there you are. Do you want to ask it in person, or just ask Craig to comment on that?
Ask it in person. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
You can't see me because I saw the view behind me and thought, nope, that's not going on the screen today. Just to put it in context, I'm one of the organisers at Newcastle Traditional Music Festival. I'm a life member and I've been involved for a long time now. I was finding it really interesting what was being said about the relationship with the community and the support from the businesses and the council. We're now on to our 52nd year this year. We fight to get a grant of £500 from Scottish Borders Council. We get very little sponsorship from local shops and businesses. If we're lucky, we might get £20 from somebody. How is that positive relationship brought about? I'd love to know. It's a general question, but it's so relevant at the moment. How on earth does that happen? How has it developed? Because we've tried, but the attitude in Newcastleton is you're there to bring money into us and we're not paying you. You're going to do the work. It's your job to do it. Or as somebody said when I first resigned, you can't resign. It's your duty to do it. Nope. I even live in Argyllshire now and still organise the damn thing.
Great. Thanks, Carol. That's really interesting observation there. Craig, do you want to jump in there?
I think the festival's always had a really good relationship with the council, and I'm really not sure how that originated. The OIC, and I'm aware that we perhaps have one of the more, although at times it might not feel like it, we perhaps have one of the more forward-thinking councils in that they recognise the value of events and of the arts to the wider economy. We don't actually have a fully funded venue as such, which others do, but we do have a festivals fund that exists year to year, and that, you know, the exact amount for that is dictated with the annual budget. But we, and I imagine the St Magnus Festival as well, are one of the largest recipients from that. I guess it's largely based on the economic impact of the festival and of the draw and the tourist draw, that not only brings into the county, but also that it kind of unleashes within the county. I mean, to take my parents as a prime example, they live in Torquil, but they'll put their caravan through in Stromness, which is 15 miles away, every year, so that they basically are in the hub of the festival every year. So that obviously has them spending a lot more money locally than they would be if they were going back and forth to their own house every day. And there's a lot of folk like that who will base themselves in Stromness for the weekend. And I think the festival is very much seen as an asset that kind of needs to be supported. In terms of, I should also say with the council as well, one thing that really helps release money from them is when they can see that there's been national funds come into the county as well. You know, obviously they're delighted if Event Scotland or Creative Scotland are putting money into the local economy. And I don't know if there's perhaps a kind of bravado that comes with that, but they don't like to be upstaged. Certainly the OIC is our main funder. But we're not alone in that respect, you know, whether it's, you know, there's a traditional dance weekend, the St Magnus Festival, the Science Festival in September. I think they recognise the value of them all throughout the calendar in stretching the tourism season as well beyond the kind of traditional summer months. In terms of the local business community, we changed that up a few years ago, but we generally try and speak on their levels and just kind of explain the benefits of support. Because we're a charity, for example, it's a tax deductible benefit to the festivals if they're able to support us. So quite often, and Orkney is in a very fortunate position in that we're kind of at the centre of the renewables boom at the moment. So there's a lot of quite you know, really interesting companies that are setting up there. There seems to always be various construction projects on the go, so there's large amounts of money being spent.
There's a lot. It's one of the richest councils of the 32, I think. You know, but we've got loads of other stuff to get through as well. So I'm just going to open up the floor a little bit more here. David Francis is on the call, known to many of us. David, you had a comment, I think.
Yeah, it was really on the question of the virtual digital side of things. I work with the Traditional Music Forum in Scotland. It's a national network of trad music organisations, some of which are represented here. And we had a meeting about 3 months ago, I think it would be now, of almost all of the Scottish folk festivals. And this question of digital was a very vexed one, because although some folk have the capacity to offer that, you know, other smaller festivals don't. And even for those that do have the capacity, there's a lot of additional expense involved in streaming, videography, extra sound, lights, and so on and so forth. As the upshot of that meeting, I spoke to Creative Scotland, and they're actually quite keen. This is a sort of announcement really. They're quite keen to fund some sort of digital strategy for Scotland's folk festivals, and they're willing to put up some money for that from their targeted funds. I think partly because they realise the importance of the sector to the Scottish creative economy, but also I think that what applies to folk festivals can also probably be projected onto other events. So it's seen as a bit of a toe in the water in that respect. So I think what will be happening is that the person that will be doing the work, I would actually like them to speak to festivals in person rather than going down the survey monkey route, and actually, you know, getting some good information before they turn that into the kind of strategy that I hope will help the festivals in years to come. To do this sort of blended offer.
Yeah. I mean, I think my own sense as well, David, is exactly that from the people I've talked to. thus far. You know, there's a lot of it's very varied. You know, and I think the technological stuff is you know, there's so many ways of doing it that people are not quite sure what the advantage is from one way or the other. Caroline, Torquil, Graham, do you have any thoughts on that, on the technological side, or do you want to come in there?
One of the things we've been doing before this all came about was looking at the sort of digital and offering some kind of digital around the live HebCelt. This was back in January 20, whatever it was. And one of the challenges you have is not only do you have to have a separate kind of broadcasting crew and a content for that worked up, but you also need connectivity. And one of the challenges with a greenfield site like theirs, is that there is no real connectivity, or not something that's suitable for live streaming. So that was going to be a hiccup there, but it's definitely something I think is worth considering. But as you noted, as everyone noted, extra expense that's going to be involved in that sort of thing, and getting the agreement of people who would want to be a part of that.
We this year, Simon, are going to have what we call the McGregor Memorial Competition, which is a Pembroke competition for under 23-year-olds. We're going to have it online, but we're doing it in the simplest form possible. On the way, it'll be a YouTube recording. They'll get 7 days to upload the recording, and then we'll get it judged, and then there'll be a final as well. But that was successful last year, and it was nice to sort of promote the younger players.
Yeah, one of my pupils was in it, and actually he really appreciated the opportunity to perform.
Yeah. What was quite strange about it, like Hata said, is all the effort that they go to do it. You know, they're sort of getting to church halls, pipe halls, churches, and then you feel sorry for somebody that I know was a student at university, and they're actually recording themselves in a shed.
Yeah, David Hughes, old pal of mine, an academic, is also in the call. I think you had some comments, David, about that online thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I'll try not to blab, because I got a totally different angle on this, but
I'll keep right.
Yeah, one thing I realize is how important these festivals are to that local community. They focus on the local art forms, music, etc. I have been involved in London, for example, in a Japanese festival in Trafalgar Square every year, which has been canceled this year. Last year we did it online, which allowed us to have a lot of people coming online from Japan who couldn't perform with us before, and people around the world could watch us. That all sounds great, but the thing is, the Japan Festival in London has nothing to do with supporting an important local community. The local restaurants suffer a little, as I'm sure they do up in. If you don't have the festival, ain't nobody there to buy food and stay in the hotels. But I just wonder how this will encourage the disaster of all this COVID. Will this encourage more and more people to be able to join your festivals online? I hope this doesn't mean fewer people will attend, spend money locally, appreciate the live musicians, you know. I better shut up and keep it about that length. Are there benefits to the online?
Yeah, any responses from the panel? Thanks for that, David. That's really useful corollary. Any responses?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Graham.
I was just going to come in very quickly to say I think we've touched on it once or twice perhaps already. There's the definite pro of people not being able to attend in person is that the digital reach is so much wider than perhaps making your way, you know, from overseas, flying into the UK, getting up to the Highlands, hopping on a ferry, getting over to an island, you know, for ourselves and for Orkney. That's a sort of shared experience that a lot of people have to get there. It's not feasible for people perhaps every year to come from overseas. So being able to experience the festival, maybe having been once or twice before, but also for new people who haven't been able to make the journey to sort of dip their toe in the water, see what it's all about, fall in love with the event, and then come in the future. I think that's definitely something that there's a big advantage of the digital.
A kind of like trickle up model, you know, like so you trickle up to the live event. I mean, although in saying that, you know, I'm seeing in the press over the last few days just horrendous stories from the Highlands and Islands about domestic tourism and dirt and filth everywhere on the west coast, and some really, really poor behaviour. So that I think is another thing that's going to feed into this. I wanted to spend the last wee bit of time on this panel talking about the future, if we could, because I know that you've all been thinking about that, and I'm kind of, you know, you'll have different ideas in your heads about, well, what does the future look like next year, the year after that, and I suppose the question is really, you know, has this pandemic, you know, shifted everything, or are you planning on a return to normal life, or are you going to change and pivot a wee bit? Or so, do you want to just anyone on the panel want to come in on that question about your particular festival and how you're thinking about the longer term future at all?
We are certainly hoping to come back as much as we can next year, as a live event, as everybody would know and love. But I think, I think, you know, it's going to probably take us another sort of a couple of years after that to get back to anything like where we normally were. I think that just things are just going to be so much more difficult and not starting again, but you've still got to have that kind of reset and build up. But we'll go for it and we'll do our best, because it will be our 25th live festival, and we'll do our best to hopefully do the festival proud and get everybody fired up locally again.
Yeah.
I'm very keen, Simon, to go back to where we were, but the worry I do have is that every year you learn something and you go on and say, we'll do this next year, we'll try that. So it's a growing, you know, tradition every year. And do I have the confidence next year, having not done something for 2 years? It's a bit of a worry, I must say.
I think we're in a similar position in that we certainly our plans now are to be back at full capacity if we are allowed to. As we touched on earlier, and a couple of times, I think because we're venue based, we're at a touch wood. The last few years, our audiences have been rising to the level we're at about 94% capacity across the weekend, and you know we can't grow beyond that, certainly physically. So growth for us was leaning towards being digital anyway. So I think the incorporation of that into our ongoing strategy has certainly been accelerated through the experiences and through the learning that we've had this year. But also, if there is any enforced distancing or capacity restrictions or whatever next year, then hopefully the inclusion of monetized ticketing will help us fill that gap, so that, you know, we are kind of making the festival very much a live experience first, and then the digital element would perhaps follow that. But certainly our focus at the moment has been able to be 100% live again, and so that, you know, the incorporation of digital does not come at the detriment to the live event that everyone knows and loves, and has been attending for nearly 4 decades.
Yeah, no, that's it. Okay, great. There's a Javier Campos is on the call, I think. Are you, Javier? Where are you? What are you listed as? You put yourself down as James. Is that you? I think I'm just going to unmute James. Says he's got questions, couple of questions, too long to write. So do feel free to chip in, Javier.
Not me, no, it's not James.
Oh, it's not James. Oh.
No, I know.
Okay, well, he's obviously he's decided to. Oh no, there he is. There, he's gone away. He's joined with a different name there. So anyhow, so if you've got a question, feel free to chip in. But other than that, is that you in now, Javier? Yeah. No, it's good to have somebody internationally as well. Well, we've got Heather as well. But yeah, Javier, feel free to ask your question if I can hear you. There we go. Is that you now? I think you can unmute.
Hello?
Ah, we've got you. Good.
Okay, I don't know, you can see me.
Well, we can't see you. Oh, we can see you now.
All right. Well, hello everyone, and thank you very much for this quite interesting discussion, although I'm not sure to have understood everything, as my fluency in English is rather limited, no? Well, I have 2 or 3 questions for mainly those who are organizing or have organized this kind of events in Scotland. Sorry, for all of them, because all the rest of the people there are Scottish too. Now, for example, I have this information, which was from the Stornoway Gazette at 1996. This is from the past. It's about a positive relationship, but I think in a different way than that one which was expressing Carol, I think. Well, the information says this. It was June 27, 1996. At the festival, the HebCelt, the organizers declared that the police said to us that this was the first Friday night they could remember when they hadn't had any calls from the town. This was amazing compared to the usual Friday night. So I would like to ask if actually the positive feelings and the ambient, the relationships there in the festivals, same as it may happen in other events of this kind in France, in Spain, Italy. I've been in some of them. If it's actually real, if people change the way they behave, if there's, I don't know how to say, like another level of social cohesion, I would like to ask in general, if you feel that's something that happens among the attendees.
Okay, thanks, Javier. I think the Leosa should have first chance on that one.
I remember it well. Yeah, I think if you put on a great show and you send people home happy at the end of a night, albeit they've had a couple of drinks inside them, they're less chance of being minded to have a punch up in the town centre. It's just the way. It's just people being happy. I think that's what you have to do, and I think that's what we do in general. And it's true for any festival weekend. It's usually a very quiet weekend for the cops.
Oh, thank you.
I think just to come into quickly on that, and in terms of perhaps why that is, and I don't know if Craig might have similar experiences with Orkney, but the local community very much plays host to the event. They feel it's theirs, and for that reason, there's a huge amount of pride is taken in presenting the island and the local community to the incomers who come to visit and share in the experience. I think it's the camaraderie between everyone, it sort of gels everyone together.
Okay, great. Listen, we're a bit tight on time, so I've just asked the panel if they've got any other observations you want to share or ask of each other, and then we'll draw the event to a close. But I also want to thank everybody who's attended and all the panel. My sense is the current research I'm doing is on music in the Highlands and Islands in the rural creative economy, and there's lots of really interesting things coming in those interviews, despite the fact that no blooming music events have been taking place really for months. But I think it's really important actually now that we get back as soon as we can, and that in some respects events like this are a good way for us to kind of share what we're thinking, but also perhaps for us to start putting pressure on public authorities to actually maybe step up and provide more direct support to the arts sector and to the creative economy, often hidden in public statistics and not visible in many respects. And so that's my aim with these events, is to just just really to try and get people to air these views, and hopefully something useful will come out of it as well. So thanks to everybody. But I don't know if the panel have any other observations to make.
I'd just like to say it's important as far as the community is concerned, Simon, that the Argyllshire Gathering does pay for bagpipe tuition in the primary schools throughout Argyll, which is important. But in the back end of that, we also have the Oban High School very, very much involved on the games day. And I think that goes through parents all through to the local community. And it's an important thing that we'd like to build on every year.
I mean, it's an essential thing, Torquil, right? You know, I mean, like it's not in some respects. It's often, I think, you know, it's very much about meeting those people who are interested in piping or whatever it happens to be at the same time. You know, it's they're social events as much as musical, right? Yeah.
I think the only thing I would necessarily add is that one thing, certainly to me, that this last year plus has highlighted is that whilst we've talked about each of the events, really strong festival communities and local communities, you know, everyone's worlds have been turned on their head. And one thing that I've been really heartened by is the free sharing of information amongst the industry. And certainly when we were building the event, I mean, I spoke to Caroline and colleagues in Skye, at Celtic Connections, the Edinburgh Heart Festival, and loads, basically anyone before us that was doing an event, and every single one was incredibly generous with their information and insight. And I think just, although it can often seem like a very lonely place, the events are, you know, very much an ecosystem with artists and with all, you know, everyone else that feed into them. And yeah, just picking up the phone certainly helped us an awful lot. So would encourage that wherever possible. Yeah,
and I should say that, you know, the work I'm doing is in partnership with the touring network, of whom I think everybody on this call knows, there to help support rural promoters and agents and venues. Okay, unless there's any last words, I think we'll just end the meeting there. Thanks to everybody, both the panel and to the audience that attended. Okay, thanks everyone. Cheerio.
Bye bye.